I never liked hospitals. The smell of antiseptic, the hollow echo of footsteps. They always felt too clean for the kind of pain people carried inside them. But that night, when I woke up in recovery with an oxygen mask pressed against my face, I thought the worst was over. I thought I'd survived the surgery, the illness, the fear, until my doctor leaned close, his eyes darting toward the door like he was stealing time. He slid a folded note beneath my blanket and whispered, "Don't react. Read it when you're alone." I waited. My hands shook when I opened it. 6 words, small, sharp, and cold enough to drain the color from my veins. "Your husband paid me to kill you." For a long moment, I heard nothing. No machines, no voices, just the silence of something inside me, breaking. His name is Ethan Cole, my husband of 15 years. The man who once made promises beneath the willow tree behind our home. The man who said he'd never let anyone hurt me. I believed him. Now I know better. By sunrise, I would no longer be his wife. By nightfall, I would become something else entirely. The woman he should have never underestimated. Stay until the end, because you'll learn what happens when a man teaches his wife how to survive. And she decides to use that lesson on him. Before everything went dark, life had a rhythm I trusted. Not perfect, but steady, safe. Our mornings began with the same sound. Ethan grinding coffee, the faint whistle of the kettle, the hum of local radio news we never really listened to. I used to love those moments, the quiet between us before the world demanded anything. He'd hand me a cup, kiss the top of my head, and say, "You're my peace, Naomi." And I'd smile, believing him. That's what marriage does to you after 15 years. It builds this invisible trust, a net you think will always catch you. You stop checking for holes. We met in college. I was studying literature. He was the numbers guy, always with a plan. Together, we balanced his logic, my heart. Now he was a successful financial consultant, the kind people called charismatic, which is really just another word for dangerous if you're not careful. Our home in Willow Creek looked like the kind of place people drove by and said, "They've got it all." Cream walls, rose garden, laughter through open windows. I taught English at the local high school, spent my evenings grading essays and planning future vacations we never quite took. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. A quiet, predictable kind of happiness. Then one afternoon, Ethan came home with a different light in his eyes. He set his briefcase down and said, "You'll never guess who I ran into today." "Who?" I asked, smiling, because I loved that tone in his voice, the one that made him sound 16 again. "Claire Donovan," he said, grinning. "Remember her? From high school? She's in consulting now. Small world, huh?" I remembered the name. She'd been his first crush, the kind of girl every boy wanted and every girl tried not to hate. Blonde hair, sharp laugh, always in control. I laughed it off. "Wow, Claire Donovan. That's a blast from the past." He nodded too casually. "Yeah, we might collaborate on a few projects. She's brilliant. She's got this way of thinking about risk that's different." He stopped himself, realizing how much he'd said. I brushed it off. Married life teaches you to pick your battles. And that day, it didn't feel like one. But something shifted after that. Claire began calling, first about work, then checking in at odd hours. Her name started lighting up his phone at dinner. Ethan would glance down, silence it, and say, "She's just stressed. Big client." He said it enough times that I started believing it, because believing is easier than wondering. I met her 2 weeks later at his office's charity gala. She was even more stunning than I expected. The kind of woman who looks expensive without trying. She greeted me warmly. "Naomi, I've heard so much about you." Her smile was perfect. Too perfect. Ethan hovered beside her, proud, almost protective. When I shook her hand, something in her grip told me this wasn't an introduction. It was a declaration. During the dinner, I caught them exchanging a glance. Subtle, familiar, dangerous. I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, paranoia was the enemy of peace, and peace was the only thing I had left. The next morning I asked him, "You two seem close." He didn't flinch. "She's my colleague, Naomi. Don't do this." "Do what?" "Start reading into things." That sentence hit harder than it should have, because I wasn't reading into things. I was reading between them. Still, I swallowed it, smiled, kissed him goodbye. He left smelling of her perfume. I didn't even know I knew her scent until then. In the weeks that followed, little things began to shift, like invisible threads pulling at the seams of our life. His shirts came home freshly pressed, but not by me. His credit card bills had new restaurants I'd never heard of. And when I asked him how his day was, his eyes looked everywhere but at me. I told myself, he's just tired, work stress. Because sometimes you'd rather live with a lie than face the truth that your life is being rewritten. And you're no longer the author, but the body always knows before the mind does. I started feeling sick, dizzy. My hands trembled while grading papers. Ethan said it was hormones, age, stress. He poured my vitamins for me every morning. He smiled when I took them, and I smiled back. I remember the night it all started to feel wrong. A small thing, but small things build avalanches. We were watching a movie. He was texting. I teased him. "Claire again?" He froze, just for a heartbeat, then smirked. "Jealous?" "Should I be?" He leaned closer. "Never, baby. You're irreplaceable." But that night as he slept, I checked his phone and found nothing. No messages. Not one. That's when I realized the danger wasn't in what I saw. It was in what he'd already erased. I didn't say a word. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and caught my reflection in the window. Tired, older, but still alive. Something deep inside whispered, "Not for long." That whisper stayed with me, even when he started working late, even when Claire's number appeared on our caller ID at midnight, even when I started waking up with headaches so sharp I thought my skull might split. Back then, I didn't know he'd already made a plan. I didn't know my body was turning against me. One pill, one dose, one lie at a time. All I knew was this. The man I trusted most was starting to feel like a stranger in my own home. And strangers, even the ones you love, can be deadly. The first crack didn't sound like breaking glass. It sounded like laughter. His, low and easy, hers, sharp and bright. Drifting from his office at the 10:47 p.m., while I stood in the hallway with a laundry basket pressed to my ribs like a shield. I wasn't spying. I was breathing, counting steps to keep the world from tilting. "Tomorrow works," Ethan said, voice wrapped in velvet. "Same place." A softer reply followed. I couldn't hear the words, only the tone. Ownership dressed as concern. I knocked, polite out of habit. He opened the door too quickly, smile staged, phone angled face down on the desk. "Hey, babe," he said, fingers still hovering over the screen. "Everything okay?" "Client stuff," he answered, smooth, practiced. "Claire's got a nervous investor." I nodded. The lie slid past like a fish in dark water. I felt the tail flick against my skin. The next fracture came disguised as kindness. He brought me tea the following morning, steaming in my favorite mug with the chipped rim. Said, "Doctor's appointment today, remember? We should move it up. You've been dizzy." I blinked through the fog. "You scheduled it?" He smiled. "I take care of you." It sounded like a vow. It tasted like control. That night, we were supposed to meet for dinner at Lark and Elm, the place with the black and white photographs and the bourbon-glazed salmon he always ordered. He texted at the last minute. "Can't make it." Crisis. I went anyway. Habit, hunger, pride. I don't know which drove me there, only that I sat alone beneath the photograph of a man kissing a woman's wrist while the server kept refilling water I didn't drink. When I walked back to the parking garage, I saw Ethan's car leaving the alley behind the restaurant. Not the street, not the valet lane, the alley. Headlights off until the bumper met moonlight. I froze. He didn't see me. In the passenger seat, a silhouette lifted a hand, a white arc of a smile catching dashboard glow. I told myself it could be anyone, a colleague, a client, a ghost. The engine whispered away. At home, I set the table anyway. I'm not sure why. Maybe I wanted evidence that I had kept the faith. 2 plates, 2 napkins, 1 candle. It burned down alone, thin wax bending like a tired dancer. He came in late, tie loose. Scent unfamiliar. Rough night? I asked, keeping my voice even. Don't start, he sighed, dropping keys in the bowl like a judge's gavel. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. He poured himself whiskey, lifted the glass, and that's when I saw it. A faint lipstick crescent on the rim, a shade I never wore, a color that looked like a decision. New brand? I said lightly. He stared at the glass, then at me, and laughed. The sound didn't reach his eyes. You're funny. I wasn't trying to be. He rinsed the glass too long, scrubbed it like guilt could be erased with hot water and a sponge. Days blurred. I graded papers in the afternoons and woke at night feeling like my blood was slow. Ethan recommended a retreat weekend, said I needed quiet. Claire has a property out near Raven Falls, he added, casual. Use it. I'm free. My stomach tightened. I don't need charity. It's not charity, he said, voice cooling. It's smart. I smiled because anger would give him cover. We'll see. Saturday, I cleaned the car. It was a small act, a domestic instinct, a way to reclaim space. Under the passenger seat, my fingers brushed something smooth. I pulled out a single silver earring, elegant, heavy, shaped like a teardrop caught mid-fall. Not mine. I held it to the light. It flashed like a warning. I placed it on the counter, waited. He found it after lunch, paused for a fraction of a second, then picked it up with 2 fingers like he was handling a coin. Claire's, he said, shrugging. She rode with me to a meeting, must have fallen. Of course, I answered, because the truth sometimes needs space to breathe before it speaks. He tossed the earring into the junk drawer, shut it with his hip, and kissed my temple. Don't overthink, he murmured. I nodded and memorized the drawer. I started checking our statements at night. A quiet rebellion. A wine bar I'd never heard of. A hotel 2 towns over, booked twice in the same week. A pharmacy charge that didn't match my prescription. The pattern wasn't loud, but it was there. A rhythm hidden beneath the music of our life. On Tuesday, he forgot his phone on the kitchen island. The screen lit up with a preview. Flight confirmed, Richmond to Chicago, 2 passengers. When I looked up, he was watching me from the doorway, expression neutral. Big conference, he said, keeping it simple. With a +1? Assistant needs training. What's her name? He smiled like a blade. You don't know her. That night, I dreamed of drowning. I woke to the sound of the kettle screaming and found him at the stove, stirring oatmeal with one hand, sorting my vitamins with the other. Doctor tomorrow, he said, dropping capsules into my palm. Don't be late. I stared at the pills, at the small beige promise of obedience. Do you ever get tired of managing me? He laughed. I like order. So do prisons, I replied. He blinked just once, and the air turned colder. I drove myself to the appointment. I parked, sat in the car, and didn't move for 5 full minutes because something in my chest had learned a new word. No. Inside, the nurse smiled, took my blood pressure, asked about my symptoms. Dizzy, I said, sometimes nauseous, sometimes wrong. She paused. Wrong how? Like someone tuned my life a half step lower and didn't tell me. On my way out, I passed Ethan in the corridor. Unexpected, too casual, a bouquet of peonies in hand. Surprise, he said, kissing my cheek like a signature. You said you had meetings. I rescheduled, wanted to drive you home. My mouth smiled, my bones did not. In the car, his phone buzzed. A message flashed and disappeared. A habit, a setting, a precaution. I looked out at the parking lot. A black sedan idled 2 rows over. The driver lifted a cup, took a sip, and looked away too quickly. "Who's that?" I asked. "Security," he said without checking. "Hospital hires extra in the spring." We both knew that wasn't true. At home, I pulled the junk drawer open like a curtain. The silver earring was gone. I closed the drawer, slower than I wanted to. He watched from the doorway, hands in his pockets like a child pretending to be a man. "Lose something?" he asked. "Not anymore," I said. The next evening, I made dessert. Small, deliberate, a ritual to steady my hands. He took a bite, smiled. "You see? We're fine." "We're something," I replied. He set his fork down, leaned back, and studied me like a problem set. "What do you want, Naomi?" "Truth." "You already have it." "Not the version you rehearsed," I said softly. He stood, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and put his plate in the sink. The clink rang like an alarm. "I'm tired," he announced, heading down the hall. "So am I said. But he was already gone. I washed the plate he'd touched, the glass he'd held, the fork, the knife. Every piece of steel meant for a meal we didn't share. My reflection trembled in the faucet. Then I dried my hands, went to the garage, and opened the trunk of his car. Beneath the emergency kit was a small first aid box. Inside, adhesive bandages, antiseptic, a folded receipt from the pharmacy with my name, a refill date I hadn't requested, and a tiny pill organizer identical to mine. That was the moment the fracture stopped being a sound and became a fact. It wasn't just Claire's perfume or hidden hotel rooms or lipstick on a rim. It was a system, a plan, a man who needed me soft and compliant while he mapped my end. I closed the trunk gently, walked back inside, and smiled at the quiet house like it was an enemy I finally recognized. He wanted me sick. He wanted me slow. He wanted me small. I went to bed and lay beside him, breathing in the rhythm I used to trust. "Good night," he murmured, already drifting. "Goodbye," I whispered to the version of me who hadn't yet learned how to survive. After the fracture, the house didn't change, but I did. I started listening to silence like it was language. The hum of the refrigerator, the sigh of the air vents, the pause before Ethan answered simple questions. Every sound felt coded, like a message I hadn't learned to read yet. We moved through days as if nothing had shifted. 2 actors performing marriage for an audience that no longer existed. He'd hand me coffee in the morning, fingers brushing mine too gently, too precise. A man careful not to leave fingerprints on his own crime. "Get some rest," he'd say. "I'm fine," I'd answer, both of us knowing that word was a lie. The distance didn't come from shouting, it came from management. He began controlling small details, what I ate, when I drove, who I saw. He offered to handle my prescriptions so I don't forget. He set reminders on my phone without asking. He started locking his. It's funny, control often disguises itself as love. He'd call from the office just to ask, "Did you take your vitamins?" He'd track my location under the excuse of safety. He told friends I was fragile, the words soaked in fake tenderness, and they believed him because he looked the part. Calm, worried husband of the year. Meanwhile, Claire's presence became impossible to ignore. Her name slipped into every conversation like a watermark. "She's brilliant. She really helped close that deal. She thinks I should travel more." He spoke of her like a prophet quoting scripture, never realizing how much truth leaks through admiration. One night, he came home later than usual. His shirt smelled like hotel soap, and there was a faint line on his wrist where a watch had been, but not the one I'd gifted him. He kissed me on the cheek, cold, mechanical. "You're up late. Couldn't sleep?" "Don't think so much," he said, brushing my hair from my face. "It's bad for you." That line, it wasn't advice. It was an order. I stopped confronting him. I learned to smile on cue, to measure my voice so it sounded small, harmless. When predators think you're weak, they lower their guard, and that's when the real learning begins. I started taking notes, literal ones. Hidden pages in my recipe book, scribbles on old envelopes, what he bought, where he went, who he called, how often Claire appeared on caller ID. The more I observed, the quieter I became. Silence became armor, and under it I planned. He must have sensed the shift. One morning he stood behind me as I arranged flowers, roses, white, the kind that bruise easily. "You're distant lately," he said softly, "just tired." He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "You know I'd never hurt you, right?" I smiled without turning. "Of course." He exhaled. Relief or calculation, I couldn't tell. "Good," he whispered, "because I don't want us to lose what we have." Then he left, humming, light on his feet. People always hum after deciding something final. Days later, the dizziness returned. Sharper, meaner. I stopped taking the pills he gave me, pretended to swallow, let them dissolve in my palm. Within 48 hours, my head cleared. Within 72, my body felt alive again. The realization came like lightning. Whatever was killing me was coming from him. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I could prove it. The next week, he announced a business trip to Chicago. "Claire's going too," he said, watching my face. "That makes sense," I replied. "You work well together." He smiled, relieved by my calm. Before he left, he pressed a kiss to my forehead. "Don't forget your medication." "I won't," I promised, and meant it in my own way. While he was gone, I searched the house like it was a crime scene. In his office drawer, beneath tax files, I found a thin blue folder marked Health Directive. Inside were forged consent forms, my name, my signature, authorizing an experimental treatment. The witness line read, "Claire Donovan." That night, I sat in our bed, folder in my lap, heart steady, not broken, not afraid, just awake. When Ethan returned 3 days later, he found me in the garden trimming roses. He kissed my cheek, sniffed the air. "Smells like peace." "It's fertilizer," I said. He laughed, walking inside, unaware that I was done being soil. From that day forward, every look, every touch, every word became a countdown. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was evidence in motion. And soon he'd learn what happens when the prey starts writing the story. The day it broke open started like any other. Small lies wore their Sunday best. Sun through the blinds. Coffee on the counter, a kiss on my temple that felt like a signature he'd practiced. "Take it easy today," Ethan said, placing 2 capsules in my palm. "You've been pushing." "I'll rest," I promised, letting them halo my skin before slipping them beneath my tongue, then into my sleeve when he turned. He lingered, searching my face for compliance. "Text me if you feel dizzy." "I will." He smiled like a landlord. Good girl. By noon, the house was quiet enough to hear dust settle. I graded 2 essays, watered the roses, and swallowed a glass of water that tasted faintly metallic. When the room tilted, it didn't warn me. It folded like a bad secret. My knees kissed tile. The world pinwheeled, slow, deliberate, cruel. I crawled toward the phone, breath tight, vision grainy. The screen swam, then steadied. I tried Ethan first. Straight to voicemail. I tried 911 next, words slurring like wet matches. Dizzy, chest tight, my name is... The operator's voice came warm and distant. "Help is on the way. Stay with me." Sirens sewed themselves into the afternoon. The paramedics' hands were brisk, professional. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" I nodded, mouth dry. "Pulse irregular," he called. "Blood pressure low." They loaded me into the ambulance. The ceiling lights strobed, counting down something I didn't want to understand. Ethan arrived at the hospital before I could form a sentence. He burst into the ER bay, tie perfect, eyes perfect, concern perfect, every detail rehearsed. "My wife," he said to anyone who'd listen, "she's been unwell for weeks. Please." He squeezed my hand hard enough to bruise. "Hang on, Naomi. he whispered, then looked over my shoulder and nodded at someone I couldn't see. A shadow moved. A perfume I knew filled the air, citrus and winter. Claire. She stepped into my line of sight, lips pressed into sympathy. "Naomi, we'll take care of you," she murmured, voice of velvet rope. "You're in the best hands." Ethan's thumb brushed my knuckles in rhythm. I tried to speak. "Why, are you—" "Work brought me here," she said softly. "Coincidence." Her smile flickered. Not kindness, preparation. A doctor introduced himself, crisp and careful. "I'm Dr. Halverson. Your scans show a complication that needs immediate attention. We're recommending a minimally invasive procedure to stabilize your heart rhythm." He explained risks in bullet points I couldn't catch. Ethan produced a folder from nowhere. "Her health directive," he said like a magician. "Signed." The doctor glanced at the forms, then at me. "Mrs. Carter, do you consent?" My mouth tried to shape the word no. The room rolled again. Ethan leaned close, breath clean and untraceable. "Say yes, baby. We can't lose time." Claire watched, eyes steady, hands folded. A bridesmaid at a funeral. I nodded. Maybe I nodded. Maybe my head just fell. A pen touched my fingers. A line was drawn. The world narrowed to a mask, a sheet, footsteps, a curtain. Somewhere, Ethan said he'd be right outside. Somewhere, Claire said she'd update the office. The operating room was colder than truth. Metal hummed. Monitors blinked with the patience of long-distance runners. The anesthesiologist adjusted my mask. "Deep breath, ma'am." Lights bloomed into halos. The ceiling drifted like a slow ocean. When I woke in recovery, the first thing I felt was the weight of survival. The second was a stare. Dr. Halverson stood beside me, chart in hand, face set like it carried too many secrets. "You're okay," he said, voice pitched just above a whisper. "You did well." I nodded, throat raw. He lowered his eyes, then lifted them with a decision. He slipped a folded paper under the blanket, slow enough to be seen, fast enough to look accidental. "Don't react," he said, lips barely moving. "Read when alone." He left. The room clicked. A nurse checked my vitals and adjusted the IV. "Your husband's in the family area," she said softly. "Beautiful man. Very attentive." My chest tightened around something that wasn't pain. "Can I?" I croaked. "Water?" she offered, and I nodded. "Alone." I pulled the paper free with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone braver. The fold had been done twice, then once again, a small, careful ritual for dangerous words. I opened it. "Your husband paid me to stop your heart. I couldn't. Get help outside this hospital. H." Nothing in me moved for a long, elastic beat. Not breath, not thought. Just that sentence, laying itself across my life like a blade. The curtain whisked open. Ethan entered, followed by Claire, both wearing faces rehearsed for sympathy. He took the chair, leaned in close. "How do you feel?" I hid the note under my thigh and smiled, slow and tired. "Like I almost died." He softened, a beautiful performance. "You're safe now." Claire's eyes scanned my face. "Truly," she said, "we'll get you strong again." Her hand rested on the bed rail. Nails immaculate. I wondered if they had scratched anyone else's life so cleanly. "Doctor says you'll need monitoring," Ethan added. "We'll arrange everything. Home care, medications, I'll handle it." He squeezed my hand, pressure calibrated. The message was clear: control walks in love's clothing. "Rest," Claire said, brushing a stray hair from my forehead like a sister. "Let us take care of you." Let us. Two words that sounded like mercy and meant something else entirely. They left when the nurse returned. The curtain fell. I slid the note back into the blanket and tucked it under my pillow like a weapon disguised as a wish. The nurse adjusted my drip. "You've got a friend on the floor," she said lightly. "Administrator who recognized you from the school. Wants to say hi when you're up for it." Daniel Price? The name meant nothing. The timing meant everything. "Later," I whispered. "Of course." I closed my eyes and rewound the day frame by frame. The capsules, the collapse, the flowers Ethan hadn't brought, Claire appearing where coincidence shouldn't, the health directive with my name, the doctor's trembling choice. A map drew itself, not random, orbits, plans. Me at the center, and someone else holding gravity. When I woke again, evening had pressed itself against the windows. The city hummed like a hallway secret. Ethan returned alone, looser now, relief unbuttoned. "I talked to Halverson," he said, pulling his chair close. "We're lucky. He says we caught it early." "We?" I asked gently. He smiled. "Us." I reached for the water. My hand shook, a performance I didn't need to rehearse. "Scared me," he added, letting his voice break in the right places. "Scared me too," I said, and meant it, though not in the way he hoped. "Let's not do this again," he murmured. "What's this?" "Chaos," he said quickly. "I'll simplify things. You won't have to worry." There it was, the offer I had been trained to accept. Safety as surrender. He kissed my forehead. "Sleep. I'll be here in the morning." He left a second later. That's how promises work. The night nurse dimmed the lights. "You want the TV on?" "No, thank you." "Need anything else?" "Just quiet." She smiled and stepped away. In the space she left, I took out the note again, pressed the words into my skin until they felt like instructions. I needed help beyond their reach. I needed clarity, records, proof. I needed someone who didn't think I was fragile. A shadow filled the doorway. A man in a Navy badge hung back a respectful distance. "Mrs. Carter?" he said softly. "I'm Daniel Price. We met once at the school fundraiser. I handle compliance for the hospital." I nodded, alert under the calm. He glanced toward the nurse's station, then back to me. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. He pulled a chair in. "I saw your consent forms. Something looked off." I met his eyes fully. "You're right. Do you want to talk somewhere more private tomorrow?" "Yes." He watched my face the way decent people do when they're trying not to do harm. "No pressure," he added. "But if you need help, I know where the files live." "Thank you," I said, meaning it from the last intact place inside me. After he left, I hid the note in the lining of my pillowcase and slid sleep over me like a sheet I didn't trust. Outside, the city changed shifts. Inside, my mind cataloged names, dates, the scent of Claire's perfume in the ER, the angle of Ethan's smile, the forged loop of my own signature. At dawn, Ethan returned with peonies and a schedule. He touched the flowers to my cheek. "You love these," he said. I inhaled their sweetness and thought of funerals. "We're going home today. I already spoke to discharge." "Today?" "Doctor agrees," he answered. "You'll rest better there." A nurse wheeled me to the exit while he walked beside us, hand on the chair as if guiding a prize. Claire waited near the revolving doors, hair smooth, coat immaculate. "Let me know if you need anything," she said. "I will," I lied, rolling past her. At the curb, Ethan opened the car door with ceremony. I slid in, clutching my discharge folder like it held a passport. As the hospital shrank in the rear view, I pressed my palm flat against the seat and promised myself something I hadn't promised in years. If he planned my ending, I would plan his unveiling. If he paid for silence, I would purchase light. And when dessert was finally served, I would make sure the sweetness cut. Going home felt like walking back into a crime scene that hadn't realized it was one yet. The air smelled the same, cedar and lemon polish, but underneath there was something faintly chemical, a sweetness that didn't belong. Ethan carried my hospital bag inside, humming. "You'll feel better here," he said, setting it down by the stairs. "Hospitals drain you." He didn't see the way my hand clenched the discharge folder, where the doctor's note hid between insurance papers and release forms. I smiled. "You're right. Home's safer." He kissed my forehead like a brand and went to make coffee. I watched him move, casual, efficient, a man comfortable in the house of his own deceit. The same gestures that once looked like care now looked like choreography. Every movement rehearsed, every word positioned. He poured the water, measured the beans, glanced at me. 2 sugars, right? Just 1 now, I said softly. He froze for half a second, long enough to confirm that he'd been paying attention to every habit. Then he smiled. Right, I forgot. No, you didn't, I thought. You never forget anything you control. After he left for work, I called the number on Dr. C. Halverson's card. It rang once, then again, then disconnected. Deadline. By evening, I had a visitor, Daniel Price, the hospital administrator. He stood at my door holding a brown envelope and a nervous half smile. "Didn't think you'd answer," he said. "Didn't think you'd come." He looked over his shoulder before stepping in. "You weren't supposed to be discharged that fast. Halverson's gone. Took early leave this morning." "Gone?" "Official story, family emergency. Unofficially, he's scared." "Of who?" I asked, already knowing. He didn't answer. He handed me the envelope. "Copies of your consent forms. Look at the signatures." I opened them. 2 neat pages, my name written in ink I'd never touched. Same slant, same loops, perfect forgery. "He didn't do this alone," I murmured. Daniel nodded. "Claire Donovan's listed as witness." My pulse slowed to something deliberate, almost calm. "Can you keep this quiet?" He hesitated. "For now, but if what I think is true, you need protection." "I don't need protection," I said. "I need proof." He studied me. Maybe seeing the teacher who'd once recited poetry, now rehearsing vengeance. "Be careful," he said. "Men like him, they make safety sound like love." "I know," I replied. "That's why I stopped listening." After he left, I sat in the dark living room, lit only by the ticking clock. Claire's laugh echoed faintly from a voicemail Ethan hadn't deleted. I pressed play. "We'll finalize the plan tomorrow. She trusts you too much to see it coming." My throat tightened. Then Ethan's voice. "She always did. That's her problem." I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just rewound and played it again, this time memorizing every syllable, every tone, a confession hiding in plain sound. I transferred the file to my phone, sent a copy to a private drive, and deleted all traces. Then I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and began sketching what came next. The next day, Ethan came home early. He looked radiant, alive in the way men do when they think the game is already won. He brought roses. "For you," he said. "White, your favorite." I took them, smiled. "They're beautiful." "They reminded me of you." "Because they bleed when you touch them?" I asked lightly. He laughed, uncertain. "You've changed since the hospital." "I'm awake," I said. "It's different." He moved closer, eyes searching. "Are you angry with me?" "Should I be?" "I've done everything to help you," he said, voice trembling just enough to look sincere. I tilted my head. "Then why do I feel worse every time you say that?" He didn't answer. He just set the roses on the table, the petals already bruising at the edges, control faltering. That night, I found his laptop open in his study. Reckless of him, or confident, emails filled the screen, threaded like a net. Subject, finalizing payout. Client, Navro 419, Carter, Naomi. Attached, copies of my medical insurance policy and a pending transfer dated next week. Recipient C. Donovan. My pulse steadied. There it was, the shape of their greed, disguised as professionalism. Ethan hadn't married for love anymore. He'd married for leverage. I saved the files to a flash drive, pocketed it, and returned everything as I'd found it. He'd never know until it was too late. Days passed. I played my role perfectly. The recovering wife, compliant and gentle. We went to dinner with colleagues. I laughed at his jokes, touched his arm. He watched me closely, measuring compliance by how much I smiled. Claire was there too. in a black dress that looked like confession turned couture. She leaned in during dessert, whispered something in Ethan's ear that made him grin. I excused myself to the restroom, locked the stall, and exhaled. When I came out, she was waiting by the sink, touching up her lipstick. "Naomi," she said, tone sugar-dipped, "you look so much better. We were all worried." "We?" She smiled into the mirror. "Ethan mostly. He's devoted." "Devotion's easy," I said. "Integrity's rarer." Her reflection froze for just a second, then she laughed. Too loud, too long. "You always had a poet's tongue," she said, turning toward me. "Be careful how you use it." I walked out before she could finish her smile. At home, Ethan poured us both wine. "You were quiet tonight." I had a lot to think about. About life, death, the small space between them. He blinked. "That's morbid." "Maybe, but it's real." He touched my hand. "Don't think about dying." "I don't," I said softly. "I think about who'd benefit." He didn't laugh this time. Later, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The note under my pillow felt heavier each night, a truth too dangerous to keep, too risky to reveal. I thought of Daniel's warning, of Halverson's trembling hands, of Claire's lipstick hiding threat behind perfume. Every plan has a pattern, every predator a blind spot. Ethan's was arrogance. Claire's was vanity. Mine? Patience. The next move would have to look like surrender. So I smiled into the dark and whispered to the quiet house. Tomorrow, I start pretending again. But this time, it's for me. The morning after the dinner, the house felt different, like it finally realized I wasn't asleep anymore. The walls listened. The air tasted sharp, like old secrets ready to rot. Ethan kissed my cheek on his way out. Same ritual, same lie. "Don't wait up," he said. "I never do," I answered. As soon as the door shut, I exhaled every ounce of performance. The smile dropped, the mask cracked. It was time. I pulled the flash drive from its hiding spot inside the hollow of a candle jar and plugged it into my laptop. The files bloomed open, lines of text glowing like confessions, insurance policies, transfer receipts, emails between Ethan and Claire, all pointing to one final transaction scheduled for the end of the month. Payout upon confirmed death of Naomi Carter, $2,000. The beneficiary, Claire Donovan. Witnessed by Ethan Cole. The date was circled in bold, 10 days away. I printed every page and tucked the stack into a manila folder, labeling it with a single word, Endgame. At noon, I drove to a nearby coffee shop, neutral territory, too public for danger, too loud for whispers to be traced. Daniel Price was already there, back to the wall, eyes scanning the room with a practiced subtlety that told me this wasn't his first dance with corruption. He looked up as I slid into the booth. "You shouldn't have come alone." "I'm not alone," I said, lifting the folder. "I brought company." He opened it and skimmed the papers, jaw tightening. "This isn't negligence, it's orchestration." "They forged everything," I said quietly. "My signature, my consent, even the medical records. They planned to kill me through procedure, paperwork murder." Daniel leaned back. "Claire Donovan's name is all over these." "She's not his assistant," I said. "She's his partner's in more ways than one." He nodded. "And the doctor?" "Gone," I replied. "Vanished right after my surgery. He left me that note, then disappeared." Daniel tapped the papers. "This is enough to start a formal inquiry, but they'll hide. They'll bury evidence before we get close." "Then we don't go through official channels," I said. "We go through them." He frowned. "Meaning?" "I want Ethan to believe he's still in control. Let him think I'm weak, naive. He'll show me everything if he thinks I can't see it." Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You're walking into fire." "I'm not walking," I said. "I'm setting it." That night, I made dinner, his favorite. Lamb, roasted vegetables, red wine breathing on the table. He walked in, smiling, surprised. "This is a sight for sore eyes." I thought we could celebrate, I said lightly. Celebrate what? Second chances. He paused, scanning my face. You're feeling better. Almost new. He sat, poured the wine, watched me take the first sip. When he drank, I smiled inside, because I hadn't touched mine. Claire called today, he said between bites. She wanted to know how you're doing. How sweet, I said. You two talk a lot. She worries, he said, his tone walking that fine edge between honesty and mockery. Do you? I asked. He looked up, surprised. Of course. Then don't, I said softly. Worrying is for people who think they can still lose something. He tilted his head, suspicious. You sound different. Maybe I am. He laughed, but the sound was brittle. I liked you better soft. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. You still think I am? He didn't answer. He just smiled that same careful smile, the one he'd used before changing the subject, before steering me back into silence. Only this time, I didn't follow. Over the next week, I played my part with surgical precision. Every morning, I took his pills in front of him, then spat them out later. Every afternoon, I smiled at Claire's calls on speaker, chiming in like the forgiving wife. Every night, I copied new data from his phone while he slept. Text threads, encrypted messages, digital footprints of deceit. Daniel and I met twice more in secret, trading updates like war generals. He'd managed to trace the financial transfers, offshore accounts, shell companies, all leading back to an entity called CD Holdings. Claire Donovan. Every trail ended with her name. One night, Daniel slid me a small recording device. Keep this on you, he said. When he slips, and he will, you'll have proof no one can bury. I took it. Thank you. He hesitated. You sure you want to hear what he'll say? I've been living in silence, I said. I'm ready for noise. 3 days later, I got my wish. It was late, 11:32 p.m., and Ethan was on the phone in his office. The door was cracked just enough. I turned on the recorder. Yeah, he said, voice low. Everything's on track. She's been compliant. The sedatives keep her calm. A pause. No, she doesn't suspect. She trusts me. Another pause, then laughter. Of course I'll take care of it. You think I'd leave loose ends? By next week, it's done. You'll have your share. He ended the call, poured whiskey, and stared at his reflection in the window. The self-made god admiring his own creation. I stood in the hallway, heart steady. That was the first time I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The next morning, I told him I wanted to host a dinner. For who? He asked. For you, I said. For us. For everything you've done for me. He blinked, confused, then smiled. You sure you're up for that? I've never been stronger. He bought it. Because people like Ethan always buy what flatters their ego. That afternoon, I texted Daniel. It's time. Friday night. Bring backup. Thursday evening, Claire stopped by unannounced. She wore red, deliberate, confident, cruel. I came to check on you, she said, stepping inside without waiting. How thoughtful, I replied, taking her coat. Drink. Just a minute, she said. Ethan wanted me to drop off these documents. She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside were travel itineraries, fake invoices, and one one-way ticket to Switzerland, in Ethan's name. Departure date, Saturday morning. So soon? I murmured. Big conference, she said, smiling like a knife. Maybe you'll join next time. Maybe I will, I replied. She looked at me too long, then leaned closer. You're lucky, Naomi. He really cares about you. I met her eyes. Is that what he tells you? Her expression flickered, a glitch in the mask, then reset. Rest, she said, turning for the door. You'll need it. When she left, I sealed the envelope again and set it beside the wine glasses for tomorrow. Everything was ready. The recordings, the papers, the dinner invitation. Tomorrow, the masks would come off. Tomorrow he'd find out I wasn't the one dying anymore. The morning after the dinner, the house felt different, like it finally realized I wasn't asleep anymore. The walls listened. The air tasted sharp, like old secrets ready to rot. Ethan kissed my cheek on his way out. Same ritual, same lie. "Don't wait up," he said. "I never do," I answered. As soon as the door shut, I exhaled every ounce of performance. The smile dropped. The mask cracked. It was time. I pulled the flash drive from its hiding spot inside the hollow of a candle jar and plugged it into my laptop. The files bloomed open, lines of text glowing like confessions, insurance policies, transfer receipts, emails between Ethan and Claire, all pointing to one final transaction scheduled for the end of the month. Payout upon confirmed death of Naomi Carter, $2,000. The beneficiary, Claire Donovan. Witnessed by Ethan Cole. The date was circled in bold, 10 days away. I printed every page and tucked the stack into a manila folder, labeling it with a single word, Endgame. At noon, I drove to a nearby coffee shop. Neutral territory, too public for danger, too loud for whispers to be traced. Daniel Price was already there, back to the wall, eyes scanning the room with a practiced subtlety that told me this wasn't his first dance with corruption. He looked up as I slid into the booth. "You shouldn't have come alone." "I'm not alone," I said, lifting the folder. "I brought company." He opened it and skimmed the papers, jaw tightening. "This isn't negligence. It's orchestration." "They forged everything," I said quietly. "My signature, my consent, even the medical records. They planned to kill me through procedure. Paperwork murder." Daniel leaned back. "Claire Donovan's name is all over these." "She's not his assistant," I said. "She's his partner, in more ways than one." He nodded. "And the doctor?" "Gone," I replied. "Vanished right after my surgery. He left me that note, then disappeared." Daniel tapped the papers. "This is enough to start a formal inquiry, but they'll hide. They'll bury evidence before we get close." "Then we don't go through official channels," I said. "We go through them." He frowned. "Meaning?" "I want Ethan to believe he's still in control. Let him think I'm weak, naive. He'll show me everything if he thinks I can't see it." Daniel hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You're walking into fire." "I'm not walking," I said. "I'm setting it." That night, I made dinner, his favorite. Lamb, roasted vegetables, red wine breathing on the table. He walked in, smiling, surprised. "This is a sight for sore eyes." "I thought we could celebrate," I said lightly. "Celebrate what?" "Second chances." He paused, scanning my face. "You're feeling better." "Almost new." He sat, poured the wine, watched me take the first sip. When he drank, I smiled inside, because I hadn't touched mine. "Claire called today," he said between bites. "She wanted to know how you're doing." "How sweet," I said. "You two talk a lot." "She worries," he said, his tone walking that fine edge between honesty and mockery. "Do you?" I asked. He looked up, surprised. "Of course." "Then don't," I said softly. "Worrying is for people who think they can still lose something." He tilted his head, suspicious. "You sound different." "Maybe I am." He laughed, but the sound was brittle. "I liked you better soft." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "You still think I am?" He didn't answer. He just smiled, that same careful smile, the one he'd used before changing the subject, before steering me back into silence. Only this time, I didn't follow. Over the next week, I played my part with surgical precision. Every morning, I took his pills in front of him, then spat them out later. Every afternoon, I smiled at Claire's calls on speaker, chiming in like the forgiving wife. Every night, I copied new data from his phone while he slept. Text threads, encrypted messages, digital footprints of deceit. Daniel and I met twice more in secret, trading updates like war generals. He'd managed to trace the financial transfers. Offshore accounts, shell companies, all leading back to an entity called CD Holdings, Claire Donovan. Every trail ended with her name. One night, Daniel slid me a small recording device. "Keep this on you," he said. "When he slips, and he will, you'll have proof no one can bury." I took it. Thank you. He hesitated. You sure you want to hear what he'll say? I've been living in silence, I said. I'm ready for noise. 3 days later, I got my wish. It was late, 11:32 p.m., and Ethan was on the phone in his office. The door was cracked just enough. I turned on the recorder. Yeah, he said, voice low. Everything's on track. She's been compliant. The sedatives keep her calm. A pause. No, she doesn't suspect. She trusts me. Another pause, then laughter. Of course I'll take care of it. You think I'd leave loose ends? By next week it's done. You'll have your share. He ended the call, poured whiskey, and stared at his reflection in the window, the self-made god admiring his own creation. I stood in the hallway, heart steady. That was the first time I realized I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The next morning, I told him I wanted to host a dinner. For who? He asked. For you, I said. For us. For everything you've done for me. He blinked, confused, then smiled. You sure you're up for that? I've never been stronger. He bought it, because people like Ethan always buy what flatters their ego. That afternoon, I texted Daniel. It's time. Friday night. Bring backup. Thursday evening, Claire stopped by unannounced. She wore red, deliberate, confident, cruel. I came to check on you, she said, stepping inside without waiting. How thoughtful, I replied, taking her coat. Drink? Just a minute, she said. Ethan wanted me to drop off these documents. She handed me a sealed envelope. Inside were travel itineraries, fake invoices, and one one-way ticket to Switzerland. In Ethan's name. Departure date. Saturday morning. So soon? I murmured. Big conference, she said, smiling like a knife. Maybe you'll join next time. Maybe I will, I replied. She looked at me too long, then leaned closer. You're lucky, Naomi. He really cares about you. I met her eyes. Is that what he tells you? Her expression flickered, a glitch in the mask, then reset. Rest, she said, turning for the door. You'll need it. When she left, I sealed the envelope again and set it beside the wine glasses for tomorrow. Everything was ready. The recordings, the papers, the dinner invitation. Tomorrow, the masks would come off. Tomorrow, he'd find out I wasn't the one dying anymore. The night they took him away, I didn't cry. Not because I didn't feel, but because I'd already done all my grieving while he was still sleeping beside me, whispering lies into my hair. Real grief ends when you run out of disbelief, and by the time those handcuffs closed, I had none left. The house stood quiet after the chaos. Police lights faded, Daniel made his last call, and for the first time in months, the air didn't smell like poison. I poured myself a glass of water, not wine, and sat in the same chair where Ethan had once planned my death. The irony was exquisite. He'd called this room his sanctuary. Now it was my throne. The next morning, the headlines hit like thunder. Financial consultant arrested in murder-for-profit scheme. Subhead, wife survives. Orchestrated medical attack. Ethan's mugshot sat right under the logo of his company, eyes blank, tie crooked. The fall of a man who'd thought control meant immunity. Claire Donovan's name appeared too. Her photo, perfect makeup, perfect smile, beside words like forgery, fraud, attempted homicide. The media loved it. The high school crush turned co-conspirator. They called her the partner in crime. I called her proof that guilt has taste, and it wears red lipstick. By noon, investors were pulling out of Ethan's firm. By sunset, the company had collapsed. Every friend who'd once envied our perfect marriage now whispered pity in public and relief in private. That's the thing about villains in suits. Everyone pretends not to see them until the blood dries. Daniel kept me updated through the storm. He had a quiet way of speaking, as if words could be steady when the world wasn't. They found forged medical files on his home computer, he said one afternoon, sliding papers across the table. Transfers to Claire's account, encrypted messages, even drafts of new policies. Yours wasn't supposed to be the last. How many? I asked. 3 confirmed. All women. My jaw tightened. He practiced on others. Looks that way. The court hearings moved fast. Public interest made sure of that. Ethan's defense team tried to paint me unstable, emotional, fragile. They waved my hospital records like red flags. They didn't know I'd already armed myself with more than emotion. I had documents, recordings, and the testimony of Dr. Halverson himself, found and protected by Daniel before Ethan's lawyers could reach him. When Halverson took the stand, he looked straight at Ethan. He offered me $500,000 to administer a lethal dose under the guise of an experimental treatment, he said, voice steady. He said his wife was terminal and wanted peace. I watched Ethan's face crumble. Not guilt, just exposure. Men like him don't feel sorry. They just hate losing the narrative. Claire broke 2 days later. She confessed to forging the signatures and facilitating the transfers, hoping for leniency. When the judge asked why, she said, "He promised me we'd start over. He said she was already dying." I leaned forward in my seat, met her eyes, and smiled. "Lies age faster than love," I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. The verdict came quickly. Guilty. Both of them. Ethan sentenced to life with no parole, Claire to 20 years and restitution for fraud. The courtroom clapped once, a single echo of relief. Daniel exhaled beside me. "It's over," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No, it's only finished for them." For me, justice didn't end in a courtroom. Justice meant rebuilding with intention, not to erase what happened, but to redefine what could. I sold the house. Every inch of it reeked of his shadow. I bought a smaller cottage near the coast, quiet, open, honest. The first night there, I slept with the windows open and the lights off. For the first time, darkness didn't feel like a threat. Daniel visited a week later, bringing boxes from evidence release. Inside, the note, the recordings, the photos, and one silver earring. Claire's, recovered from Ethan's car. He set it on the counter. "You can destroy these if you want." I stared at the earring, then smiled faintly. "No, let them remind me." We sat on the porch, the ocean murmuring like a long exhale. "You could sue his company," Daniel said. "Get everything back." "I don't want money," I replied. "I want meaning." That's when the idea came. Quiet, powerful, unstoppable. 6 months later, I launched the Halverson Project, a foundation named after the doctor who risked his life to warn me. We funded whistleblowers in healthcare, legal aid for manipulated spouses, and workshops teaching women how to protect their financial and medical autonomy. Our slogan, "Trust is not consent. Silence is not love." Reporters asked why I started it. I told them, because sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about prevention. Ethan tried to reach me from prison. 3 letters, all unopened. The third one came with a small note scribbled on the back of the envelope. "I still love you." I burned it without reading. Love without truth is just poison in disguise. A year later, I was invited to speak at a conference on survivor advocacy. The auditorium was packed, lights blinding. When I stepped to the microphone, I didn't feel fear. I felt presence. "My husband once told me," I began, "that control was love, that trust meant obedience, that silence was peace." I paused. He was wrong. Love without respect is ownership. Trust without honesty is surrender. And silence, I smiled, letting the room lean in. Silence is the sound of dying. Don't ever mistake it for peace. The crowd rose. Flashbulbs, applause, tears. But I wasn't performing anymore. I was testifying. After the event, Daniel met me backstage, hands in his pockets, expression soft. "You did it," he said. "I'm still doing it," I replied. He nodded. "You know, I think he underestimated more than your heart." "What do you mean?" "He never realized you were smarter." I laughed quietly. "That's what saves us, isn't it? The things they don't believe we're capable of." He handed me a single rose. Red, fresh, perfect. New beginnings, he said. I took it, inhaling its scent. Real, alive, untainted. Finally, I whispered. That night, I walked the shoreline barefoot, the moon painting silver across the waves. I thought of Ethan's last words, of Claire's fear, of all the women whose stories ended differently, and I promised myself I'd keep fighting for those still trapped in the performance of love. Because justice isn't a single night with flashing lights and handcuffs. It's the quiet decision to never be small again. The ocean became my clock. Mornings rose soft and silver, evenings fell in slow gold. I started measuring time not by pain but by peace, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. My cottage by the coast had no ghosts, no locked drawers, no whispers behind walls, just wind, salt, and the gentle sound of survival. I planted roses out back, red, white, and one single yellow bush. The red for anger turned righteous, the white for truth uncovered, the yellow for what I promised myself to never lose again, hope. Some mornings I'd catch myself glancing at the road, expecting headlights, footsteps, a shadow that wasn't there. Old habits die louder than love. But the fear didn't own me anymore. It only reminded me that I'd lived through it. I donated Ethan's remaining assets to the foundation. The irony wasn't lost on me. His greed now funding other women's freedom. Claire's restitution payments began trickling in soon after. I didn't touch the money. I redirected every cent to a program that taught women how to spot financial manipulation before it bled them dry. Each check arrived, signed in her name. Each one a confession disguised as currency. People in town still whispered. They always do. Some said I was brave. Others said I was cruel. But I stopped caring about either. Survival doesn't need applause. It just needs witnesses. Daniel still visited, always quiet, never pushing for anything beyond what I offered. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch and talk about ordinary things, weather, headlines, the gulls circling above the tide. Once he asked, "Do you ever miss him?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "I miss who I thought he was. But that man never existed, did he?" Daniel shook his head gently. "No, but you did, and you still do." That night after he left, I poured tea and stood by the window. The reflection staring back at me was softer, older but clearer. No fear hiding behind politeness, no guilt pretending to be love. On the table lay the silver earring they'd found in Ethan's car, Claire's gleaming like an old sin. I picked it up, turned it once in my hand, then placed it among the roses in the garden, a tiny marker for a chapter buried, not erased. As I walked back inside, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned, like peace I'd built with my own hands, brick by brick, truth by truth. Before bed, I opened my journal, the same one I'd started while pretending to recover. On the last page, I wrote, "He tried to make me his ending, but I became my own beginning." I closed it, set it on the nightstand, and smiled. 5 years later, the sea still sings the same song outside my window, but it sounds different now. Not sad, not lonely, just honest. Waves don't apologize for crashing, they just keep returning stronger. I understand that now. The Halverson Project has grown beyond me. What began as a small coastal office now spans across states. We've helped hundreds of women find their footing again, women who once sat where I sat, believing silence was survival. They send letters, sometimes handwritten, sometimes digital confessions of strength reborn. One of them wrote, "You don't know me, but your story taught me that love shouldn't need evidence to be safe." I keep that note on my desk. It reminds me that revenge fades, but purpose doesn't. Ethan died last year. Heart failure, the report said. Poetic, considering he never had much of one to begin with. Claire is still alive, somewhere behind glass walls and numbered days. She sends me apology letters every few months. I read the first one. The rest I leave unopened. Forgiveness is something I give to myself, not to them. Daniel still visits. He brings coffee, talks about the world outside my quiet town. We never defined what we are. And maybe that's the beauty of it. No control, no contracts, no cages. Just two people who survived the wreckage of other people's lies and learned how to breathe again. The roses outside have taken over the fence. Every spring they bloom wider, wilder, unapologetic. Sometimes I sit among them, tea in hand, wind in my hair, and think of how far I've come from that hospital bed, from that trembling woman who almost believed she was worth less than her husband's insurance payout. Now I teach, not in classrooms anymore, but through the women who come to me. I tell them, never hand your story to someone else's pen. Write it in your own ink, even if it stains. And sometimes, late at night, when the ocean is loud and the world feels too quiet, I think about the girl I was before all of it. Naomi Carter, teacher, wife, dreamer. She died once, but the woman who stands here now doesn't mourn her. She honors her by living loudly. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, this story is for you. If you've ever mistaken silence for peace, learn from mine. Because betrayal can break you, yes, but only if you let it end there. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't justice, it's survival. And survival, my dear, is the loudest truth of all. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these truths that too many women live quietly. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? I love knowing how far these stories travel.